unusual name, around here at least. I'm from Denmark originally, but I left about 16, 17 years ago. I've lived in the Glasgow area. I couldn't find anything rougher than greener, so I spent about 5-6 years out there. And the last 5 years now, I've been living in the Philippines. Now, I've been around the SEO world and the online business world for quite a few years. My background was very much corporate. I used to work with big companies like Xerox and IBM. I've done various management roles and interesting corporate things. And alluding to what Craig mentioned in the beginning, one of the things I always found with Glasgow was it was very hard to meet smart, amazing people because they were always hiding at home. So one of the things, when I first moved to Glasgow, I opened LinkedIn and I searched for interesting roles, and I think I messaged about 100 people. I'm like, hey, do you want to have coffee? I'm new in town, I'd love to meet some cool people. And I think about 20 said okay, so that was at least the base of my network here. I then found a whole bunch of other great avenues, such as Toastmasters and the likes, where I've met a lot of great people. But I'll definitely echo what Craig started off by saying and really say, get networking, right? Like when you meet people today, get meeting them again, right? Like set up a session to work together sometime. Like get to know people, right? Whether it's in your own industry, in different industries, it's from a business standpoint, it's been one of my biggest successes. So about 5-6 years ago, I quit working with IBM and I started my own management consultancy company. Or I kind of started a couple of years before, but I went full-time in my own thing. And I moved to the amazing Philippines because living in this area, the sun is not what you see the most of. So I figured Philippines would be a good place to stay. When I worked with IBM, I used to manage people both in Europe and Asia, so I knew the Philippines pretty well at the time. But yeah, that was a very interesting change. My focus pretty much since then have very much been on helping online business owners, helping business owners really manage people more effectively, right? So a lot of online business owners, they start an e-commerce store or something and suddenly they found themselves with heaps of people around and they don't really know how to manage them very effectively, right? So that's what I help them do. I help a lot of business owners become more effective with their stuff. Now, I do this in various ways. So I obviously do a lot of speaking. I talk to a lot of amazing people and help share a lot of tips as well as I can. I do a lot of coaching. I even have an online course as well. And one of the key things that I've found being a big challenge for people was actually finding cost-effective labor. And a couple of years after I got to the Philippines, I started an outsourcing company as well, which is currently the second of my 4 companies. And the outsourcing company have been really, really good in helping. Initially, it was mostly my clients I was helping, but now it's really people all across the world. So US, Europe, and Australia primarily, and really helping get cost-effective labor to help them execute particular repeatable tasks, right? If any of you works in SEO, you'll know that one of the key things is a lot of stuff is very repetitive. Who have written more than 1,000 meta descriptions? It's so fun, right? Hiring people to do it, it's a great way of getting a little bit more joy in your own life. And it's a great way of actually getting to do more with your time, right? Doing what adds the most value. Particularly as a business owner, it's always about optimizing the inputs you give, right? And if you're sitting doing repetitive, simple stuff that other people could be doing, you're wasting your own and your company's resources, right? So, how many of you guys in here actually employ any staff today? Can I see some hands? If there is any. Okay, a few of you. So, generally my recommendation, so I have a lot of people always asking me, and like, oh, but when can I start outsourcing? And again, particularly if you're in the SEO world, I recommend maybe initially a place like Upwork is really good because you can hire people for just a few hours and you can test it out and so on. That's really good. But there is a lot of companies, both like my own, but also many other very good companies where you can actually hire great staff. And I would say in the Philippines, I mean, you probably start maybe $400-500 a month for a full-time person, right? So that means 40 hours a week, grinding really hard. And again, particularly if you're from a place like Scotland, where the salaries are quite a bit higher, right? You can afford to let go of stuff that you otherwise would not have, right? And it's a really, really good way of scaling your business because most of the SEO business owners I've talked to, their main problem is they can't replicate themselves, right? They're all trying. They're like, oh, I wish I had another me, right? But I'm so busy doing all this stuff, and every time I get a new client, I have to spend all this time, right? And if you want to build a real sustainable business, you definitely want to start scaling up one way or another, and that usually includes other people than just yourself, right? Now there's also great service providers that you can outsource to and get to do pieces of it. So most people tend to buy citations or buy certain piece of work or content or the likes, which also works just as well to scale up, right? In terms of other things, I generally always recommend people to try and niche down a lot. So I've probably said that to a few people here already. But one of the challenges I see wherever you're an agency, an individual SEO, or whichever, a lot of people always so desperate to try and find work that they say, whoever's here, I want to help you, everyone, anywhere, right? And I understand that desperation. However, it means that every time you get a new client, you start from scratch, right? Oh, I don't know the dental industry. I need to figure out all the jargon. I need to figure all this stuff out, right? Whereas when you actually pick a niche, you put yourself in a much, much better spot, right? You put yourself in a situation that says, you know, I had this one dentist client that was really good. I want to work with dentists, right? If you build website from scratch, you can literally build a template and just update the colors or whatever, make it look slightly different, but you can have pretty much the same structure. Like you can get content rewritten, but you know, if you know a niche, you know what's in there, right? You know, you can build something that's easy to copy. You can have solid processes, whether that's for SEO, PPC, whichever it's for. You can have very, very solid processes that become much easier to replicate, and hence you can much easier copy yourself, because it doesn't become about you having to figure out every single niche, but it actually becomes about you being able to copy sustainable stuff. Right, so that's definitely one of the big advice I like giving people. It is really hard to pick in the beginning, and what I say, most people have had a few clients, whatever they do, right? They've had a few clients, and I always say, go back and look at one of them, where hopefully you got some success, right? And build a case study out of it, right? When you reach out, when you're trying to land new clients, if you like call up 20 different companies, if you start emailing random companies around you, it's a lot harder to get a client. If you say, oh, I build websites, because I'll tell you what, 8 million other people email them and say, oh, we build websites, right? You don't stand out. If you email a bar and says, hey, we are the company that build website for bars, right? They're like, oh, that's us, we don't have a website, right? Your likelihood of landing a client like that is 100 times higher. And it's much better to have a large percentage of a small market than to just struggle to get anything in a huge market, right? So that naturally the tendency in the beginning is, oh, I'll take any client, I just need money, right? I need money. But as soon as you niche down a little bit, your ability to replicate yourself, your ability to land clients, just increase so much, right? So when you're starting out, when you're still fairly small, that's one of my absolute top tips. Right? Now, one of the things we do a lot in our virtual assistant company is outreach. How many people in here have done outreach? That's a fair few hands. It's so exciting, isn't it? The 400 mails you sent like, hey, my name is Peter, I would love a link, I'll do a guest post. right? Not exciting. Again, with those tools, I mean, Russ has some good processes, right? Again, the more processes you can build around it, the more systems you can build, the more automation you can build, the better you can get around that, right? Labor is obviously an interesting aspect, and sometimes human beings help. But one of the things I love a lot is data, right? So whatever sort of staffing or whatever outsourcing or wherever you buy things like links, always look at the data, right? It might be that you have a higher response rate if you sit and custom write each and every mail, but if you can send 100 times more mails by doing it automatic, again, you have to look at the end results and see, is it worth it, right? Some of the key things that we do a lot of outreach with is, besides for links and SEO, is LinkedIn, where we work with a lot of clients trying to land new business, where we're in the digital media space and so on, right? And one of the key things we see work really well is individual videos, or let's call it videos, right? Again, when you target a niche, it becomes a lot easier. When you send a little LinkedIn message, right, and you put yourself in front of a camera, I know it sounds scary, but you put yourself in front of a camera, you say, hey, I can see you work in the real estate industry. We work with people like you. Here's a case study I've just done on another real estate company we work with, where we managed to increase the number of leads they had by 800% in 2 months, right? If you do a video, if you show up personally, and I'll tell you why, right? So many people get so much spam in their email box. So many people get spam everywhere, right? If you include a video, you don't even have to say a name, but if you're doing outreach campaigns targeting the same type people, if you do a little video saying, hey man, I can see you work in automobile industry, I can see you're also a plumber or whatever, right? If you make it just a little bit personable so that it feels like that video is targeting you, your success rate will shoot through the roof, right? And that's some of the good things, again, you can do with scale, because yeah, you need to do a video, but for most people you can probably shoot a video in 5-10 minutes, right? And don't mind it's rough. The more human it looks, like if it's perfectly edited and all that, it doesn't look right. Like if it's you sitting at home and, perfect, right? Make it look real, make people think you talk directly to them, and you'll get a ton more success, right? The third thing we do a ton of in this outsourcing company is we build a lot of websites. And oh my God, I hate that industry. If you build websites, I definitely recommend to put something reoccurring in the back of it. Because every time you're finished building a website, you have to start looking for new clients. That's a pain in the ass. And I tell everyone that want to start a web developing company, if that's what you want to do, you better be a sales guy, not a web developer. Because it's 99% sales, right? So for most SEOs we work with, and most sort of digital agencies we work with, I always tell them your best friends should always be web developers. They're always hungry for money. If you're an SEO and you need clients, go and make yourself a lot of web developer friends. Because they build a lot of websites, they gain a lot of trust from people who they build websites for. And most web developers do not know SEO. And a lot of these clients always have this idea that when they build the website, magically customers will reappear. So exactly a month and a half after a website is finished to build, you want to call them up and you want to say, hey, Russ gave me your number. He said he built you an amazing website. I just want to check if you're having all the magical traffic you expected or if you need a hand, right? So again, particularly from the website niche, even though we still build a fair few sites, I'll tell you from my experience that that is one of the most horrible niches I've ever worked in. Clients never happy. But again, the key thing we found is these cookie cutter templates, like build something really good for dentists or whatever, and just copy the same thing. If that's not what the customer wants, great, it's the wrong customer, right? But if you can do something with a cookie cutter technique, works great, right? Web dev is a good entry, and I spoke with a couple of people here actually who do web dev on the front and then sell SEO and so on. But it's a good entry, but you don't want to do that as the only thing, right? Because you need recurring income to make sure you can go on holidays and have a good time without having to struggle with your web dev. So that was a little bit of experience from my journey so far. Go ahead.
So what would be the difference between using your company or using something like Upwork?
What's the difference using our company as someone like Upwork? So the key thing for us is we only do full-time people. One of the key things for me is when you hire people less than full-time, there's two aspects. One, they keep also working for other people, and you run the risk of them someday being offered a full-time job with someone else, meaning you have spent months and months and months, they know your stuff, and then suddenly they're like, oh, I can't work for you anymore, someone else wants me full-time. So that's one of the things. Second of all, like our focus is very much about finding amazing people, right? So skills is one thing, but really when, like, again, for SEO, for example, I mean, the actual knowledge, the actual processes of SEO is not particularly difficult, right? What we're looking for is really amazing people with the right mindset and right mentality that can show up every day, right? Because most SEO processes individually are pretty easy to learn, right? So our area in general is hiring great people, right? We have a huge advantage from being on the ground. We generally help all our clients make sure that things like, oh, the internet's not working, the power's out, it's my grandma's 3rd birthday this year, and all those great excuses you sometimes get from virtual assistants, that they don't come up, right? So obviously sometimes life does happen, but generally we are on the ground and we work with people much closer and have an ability to get great people and help manage them the right way, right? So our clients basically just focus on telling the people what to do and how to do it. So that's the main difference. Any other great
How do you cope with when you hire programmers? Because each programmer has their own style of writing code. And just say they've worked for you for 3 years, they've done, let's say, 100 clients. And then what happens is they get married and say the husband, depending on the culture in the country, the husband says, no, you need to stay at home. And how do you sort of break that sort of culture with regards to they've created the code, it's like a signature, their homework, they know what they're doing, and then other people come in to step in to continue that. You know, if you're doing it on a large scale like you are.
You start over. No. Key thing is, so one of the challenges is a lot of developers, particularly in outsourced locations, are homegrown, which means they often have very, very different styles of doing things, right? So with a lot of development languages, there's certain frameworks to use, right? And what you want to do when you find developers in the first place is you want to make sure that the type of code they write is easy to understand for other people, right? Obviously, if I build something from scratch, I will know it better than anyone else, no doubt about that, right? But, and by the way, I'm no developer, but we've hired a fair chunk of developers, right? So we basically, some of our testing includes checking out their code and making sure it's easy for other similar developers to read so that other people can go in and take over. And the worst scenario is not if they work with you for 3 years. The worst scenario is if they do 90% of a huge project and then disappears, right? But generally making sure that the code is fairly easily readable by other people. And we've usually had a head programmer that used to do some testing and looking at the code from other people, right? Because again, I'm code handicapped, if you can say that. But that has been our sort of key way of trying to ensure that's useful, right? Because I mean, with WordPress, you can quite often get away with it because WordPress is quite similar, right? And if you, like, let's say you have someone custom build a plugin or something, you can often get away with it, right? But if you're going in to develop any kind of other frameworks or any custom work, you definitely want to make sure that that it's something someone else can go in and read and understand. Does that answer the question?
That's fine.
Okay. Any other? Yeah.
How do you recommend you manage sort of outsourcing then in terms of efficiency and productivity and make sure that they're always getting through the work each day and week, etc.?
Yeah, awesome question. Number one is treat them as a human being, and that might sound very simple, but what happens to a lot of time when people pay a lot less for labor, they tend to treat it a lot less. And the problem is, again, I mean, if you start in a company and you get paid the least, and therefore people treat you a lot less, do you think you're going to do amazing things? Likely not, right? So what I always recommend is treat people exactly the same. You want to make sure you do the same thing, you want to spend the same amount of time with them, you want to treat them like a regular employee, right? So that's probably the number one area where I see most people fail and where I see most virtual assistants losing value. It's not necessarily because of them or their skill, but it's much more in how they're being managed, right? So people look at the cost and they're like, oh, well, if I don't talk to the guy for 3 weeks, I don't really care, it's not that expensive, right? But the thing is, again, in your current job, or if any of you here have a job, if your boss doesn't talk to you for 3 weeks, it's kind of a bit off-putting, and it's definitely not something that helps you improve your performance, right? So again, number one is really make sure you treat them like a regular employee. And again, when people are not physically with you, like if you walk into an office every day and you talk with people, you have a bit like, how's it going? You get to know people, right? You need to do something similar with people who are remote, right? So you need to make sure that you actually spend good time talking to them, getting to know them, like get to know the name of the cat and the dog and the husband and the wife or whatever. And again, treat them like a regular employee. How do you get the most out of them? Most people love hours, and while that can work, my key focus tends to be output, right? So again, one of my favorite sayings is, if someone helped me make 10 grand, I'm happy to pay them one, right? And what I mean with that is, if I can tell them what output I'm looking for, I will be I don't really care how long it takes them to do it, right? Like if I have someone and I said, oh, I need you to do 40 links per month, I don't care how you do it, but I need these 40 links, right? If they deliver 40 links, or if they deliver 50 or 60, I'm super happy, right? If they did it in 5 minutes by paying some dude to do it, I mean, honestly, I don't care, right? I focus on the output. Now, obviously time have a relevance, and sometimes you're doing things that can be very hard to measure the output, and time can be relevant. We do occasionally use a tool called Time Doctor, which can be pretty good to track time, but I'd say where you can, try and focus on the actual product output, right? So if it's, I don't know, if it's writing meta descriptions, well, how many meta descriptions do you write per day? Or like we do a bit of SEO as well, right? And we have some managers that manage some of our individual sites, and their goal is very simple. How much money is the site making? When this site makes 1,000 a month, you get a pay raise. When it makes 2,000 a month, you get another pay raise, right? You can do it in your tempo, but the faster you do it, the more you get paid, right? So the more you can do like that to encourage them, similar to yourself, right? I mean, one of the key things for me is most people always look at employees and say, oh, they're totally different than me, right? But they're not, right? In most cases, what encourages you and what helps you will help a lot of potential or current employees of you, right? So see it yourself, like what helps motivate you, right? Because again, at the end of the day, when you're a business owner, you have a natural motivation that very few employees will have, right? But fundamentally, you want to see what are the things that works with you, right? And just to give you a couple on the top of my head, number one is time with the boss. Right? Actually, boss man sitting down, showing me that he cares about me and take the time to help me or answer some questions, or that sort of thing is very important. One of the things in most of the countries where you outsource is whatever money you pay them, they disappear. It works the same here, but here it's in the pub. But when you outsource, money disappear, right? So sometimes instead of giving them a bonus, if you do a little upgrade to the internet, or if you do an upgrade to their computer or something, that might both get you better performance, make your staff happier, and generally get you much better output, right? So this is a little bit technical, but some of the things we have done as bonuses, for example, could be upgrading people's hard drive to a SSD, because it makes it much faster, which means we get much better work, which is great. Or adding additional RAM, or I don't know, buying them a second screen or something like that, right? Because it's all things that people like because they feel it's a big reward and they feel valued, but also it helps your productivity. So it's a great double benefit.